I spent the night in the house on my own, and I didn't, I texted good night, and she didn't reply. I just thought, okay, she needs space. She's enjoying her time with her friend. And I had trouble falling asleep again. I couldn't stop thinking about, everything that had happened the day before and the night before with that night terror. And yeah, I just felt weird. It felt weird being in the house and and like having this situation. It just felt like a weird fucking start to the week. I went downstairs, showered and went downstairs and made a coffee. I don't usually eat breakfast. I just had a coffee and put the TV on and was watching the news. And there's a story on the news about I'm sure you've heard of this. There was a new build. They started to build like a new block of flats, just like right on the edge of the town, where because there'd been protests about it because they had cut down a load of like a big section of the forest for this new build, and that's the smoke alarm. It keeps going off. They put down it keeps beeping. I don't know. I tried to change the batteries in it, and but still it keeps beeping. There'd been protests because they cut down this forest or this section of the forest for the new build. But the protests achieved nothing, and they still cut down the trees anyway. And while they were excavating the land, this was on the news in the morning. While I was having my coffee, they had found like human remains under there. They didn't give any details, but it was just apart from the human remains had been found at this new build, and yeah, it's just I was thinking like fucking hell, it's good news after good news, isn't it? So I picked up my phone and I decided to give my wife a call and see what her plan was. I thought she'd definitely be off now, and I called her and she answered. She was a bit distant, let's say, but she still, she was talking to me at least. And I asked her how she was, how the evening had gone. She told me it would be nice, and she was kind of glad to get out. She needs it sometimes. And I asked her, what was there anything she wanted me to do around the place specifically today? Like I said, I had an idea of, some things that I would do, but is there anything specifically she wanted me to do? She said, yeah, like all of the stuff from like my dad and my mom that was in the garage. She said, just, move as much as that up to the attic as I could, so that the garage is empty, so that if and when we get our car back, we can park it in the garage and not have it on the street. So I said okay, and I ended the call by saying, "Look, about that wine. Look, it wasn't me. I promise you." And she just said, "I'll be back in the afternoon." So I made another coffee, and I thought, right, I'm gonna go off and gotta go up into the attic. I really didn't want to go up into the attic. Not just the night before. There's something about the house, even though I grew up there, it was like it felt to me like this was one place on Earth where like kind of ghosts existed. I don't know how to explain it. And it seems like when I'm saying this now, it seems ridiculous. Like, why would I move in why would I take it? Why would I go there if I'm like if I just generally feel uncomfortable in this place? I didn't feel uncomfortable there all the time, but when I was on my own there, or if I had to go to the attic or down into the basement, we had like a little tiny basement underneath, like a pantry underneath the kitchen. If I had to go down to those places, I was creeped out. And part of it was that, like, my dad used to kind of creep me out when I was a kid. Him and my mother used to talk about like supernatural stuff a lot. Not to me really, but between themselves. And they watched these, programs on TV like Unsolved Mysteries and that sort of thing. And I never sat down to watch them, but it was enough that it was on. And if I was going up and down the stairs or like playing with my in the kitchen or whatever, it was still on in the background, and it creeped me out. And my dad, he used to tell me stories, bedtime stories. It was him who put me to bed most nights, not my mother, even when she was alive. And he used to tell me stories. And there was one story that he told me when I was a kid that like really freaked me out. And to this day, it still freaks me out. And I mean, I guess it's not a true story, but I'm pretty sure he made it up himself. It was called The Shadow of Sparag. And the story was about there's a village in Scandinavia, like in the hills or the mountains of Scandinavia. There's this village surrounded by forests and fjords, and this small community for many years, hundreds of years, has been haunted by the sparag. And the sparag is an entity that lives in the forest, and it hunts the people, and it specifically it comes at night as people are asleep. So as people are sleeping, and it comes and holds you down in bed, and it feeds on your teeth. It would eat adult teeth, not baby teeth. So what people did in this town was that when kids got to a certain age and they'd lost their baby teeth and their adult teeth started coming through, their parents would take pliers and pull out all of their adult teeth so that the sparag wouldn't come at night and feed from their mouths. And it meant that there was this whole village with full of toothless people who lived in fear of this monster. And he would tell me that story when I was a little kid. I don't know if probably when I was 6 or 7, he told me that story. And now when I think of it, it's fucking crazy that he would tell me that. But he did, and I was terrified. And the night when I had the night terrors, that was partially what was in my head as well. This story. So there's things like that. There was things like that, and my dad would say when I was a kid, if I misbehaved, he would say that if I misbehave, if I'm naughty, he's going to take me on a trip to that village, and he's going to have one of the locals remove all of my teeth. When I was a kid, I didn't. I mean, it scared me, but it was when I got to an adult, or now when I think of it, it's like Fucking hell, that's verging on child abuse, saying something like that. But there you go. It is what it is, and that's like, you know, that's how my dad was. So right, I had to clear out the attic, or I had to clear out the garage and move all of the stuff into the attic. First things first, before I took anything up, was I wanted to go up into the attic and see what was there. Was there enough space to put everything? Because I hadn't really been up there since forever. So I went to the upstairs corridor and to the hatch to the attic door and opened it and folded down the ladder. And I did not feel good doing this. But it's daytime. It was daytime. It was morning, and well, it feels safe. Let's say I wouldn't do this at night. So I pulled down the ladder. I pulled down the ladder and I climbed up into the attic. The attic space is, about the same size as the upstairs of the house, but for the slanted roof. And there was one like window in the roof, and another window on the far wall of the attic, which kind of let light in. But there's a light switch. I switched that on just for comfort, and there wasn't a lot of stuff in there. There were some boxes around and some bits and bobs lying around, but not too much. So I thought, okay, it won't, I could just organize this somehow, and I can get a good part of what's in the garage up here, if not everything. The attic had a floor like is it MDF, kind of the cheap wood kind of thing floor. So I was up there and I'm walking around, seeing what there is to move, and I got over to near the window on the far side, and there was a huge box, and on top of this box there was a notebook, and written on the notebook on the outside cover in biro, it said "Read me." So I picked up the notebook without thinking too much and opened it, and it had a few pages written on it in handwriting. I didn't recognize the handwriting. I started reading it, and within a line, I realized what it was. And what it was a complete and accurate description of everything that had happened in the past 24, 48 hours to me. It said you were finishing off unpacking the clothes uh, in the bedroom when your wife called you down and asked you, did you want to take a break and have a tea? And that had happened. And it said you were doing things in the kitchen, and your wife was moving between the kitchen and the living room as you were finishing off, and you were listening to music on your Bluetooth speaker. And when "Live It Up" by Mental as Anything came on, you turned the volume up as loud as you could. And I'm shaking while I'm reading this. I'm shaking now while I'm telling you this. And it described everything, how I went to the square, and how there'd been this crash, with the bandaged man, and how I'd had an argument with my wife because of the wine in the garage, and how she'd left me alone in the night, and how I'd watched the news that morning, just, minutes before. Had called her, and she told me that she wanted me to clean out everything that had happened. And then it said how I went to the window in the attic and looked outside and saw the bandaged man. So I looked out of the window in the attic, and there down on the street where I could see, there was the bandaged man, and he was looking up at me. And I looked back down to the notebook, and it said, and you noticed the lamp on the floor, and you decided not to plug it in. So at this point, I'm having a full-blown panic attack, and what was going through my head was just, I'm going to do exactly the opposite of what this book says. So this lamp that I saw on the floor, there was a plug next to it. So I plugged it into the wall, and boom, I got a massive fucking electric shock. Now, I don't know if you've ever had an electric shock, or like a full-blown electric shock, and how it feels like when it goes through your body, but it feels like you get kicked from every possible angle, like being kicked by 1,000 people all at once. I had this huge electric shock, and everything went kind of black. I had the strangest sensation, and I felt sick in my stomach. I felt nauseous. And then I think I dropped the lamp, and I was standing there, opened my eyes again. It was pitch dark in the attic. And on that box where I'd found the notebook, there was a mobile phone, and it was ringing, quietly ringing. And I looked at it, and the name that came up on the phone was Answer, Don't Speak. So I picked up the phone. It was my dad on the phone. And he said, "You're okay, son. You stay calm." And I said, "Dad, what? I don't know what's happening. I think I'm going crazy." And he said, "You're not going crazy, son. So just stay calm, stay quiet, stay perfectly still." And I said, "There's a man outside." And he said, "There's no man outside right now. You're fine." And he said, "This is a lot to take in, and there's going to be a lot to take in, but just one step at a time. And the first things first is you need to do exactly what I say. To stay safe, you need to do exactly what I say. And the first thing you need to do is stay where you are for the next 2 hours. And when you see that, don't move, don't make a sound. And when you see that the clock on this phone says it's 1 o'clock in the morning, then you leave the attic." I could hear 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay, I'm trying to connect this in my head, because for me it was 10 o'clock in the morning. From downstairs, like in the few seconds that this had all happened, in the 30 seconds or whatever, I could hear from downstairs the Mental as Anything, Live It Up playing. And then I heard it stop. And I said, "Dad, what's going on?" And he said, "You're not going insane. but you've traveled back in time 2 days, roughly 2 days. And he said, just stay put and call me when you get out. He said, when you see the clock on the phone says 1 o'clock, go down, take the car, and drive to Tom's farm. Tom's my uncle. And I said, the car's been stolen. I can't take it. And he said, it hasn't been stolen yet. So I stayed there in the attic, trying to get my head round what had happened, what was going on. This is just more and more to take in. I was derealizing, depersonalizing, however you call it. It just felt like I was living inside a dream. And I could hear myself downstairs and my wife talking. And I could hear myself and my wife downstairs going to bed and having a discussion in bed about how we shouldn't have taken the house from my dad because he was asking for help and we were forever. I heard the discussion that we'd had that night of the power cut the 2 days before. So I waited. One of the waiting for me was also a chance to calm down. When I didn't move from that spot by the window on the other side of the attic, and when I saw the clock on the phone said 1 o'clock, exactly 1 o'clock, I put the phone in my pocket and I walked slowly across the attic to the attic door hatch, which was closed. And I, like, as gently and as quietly as I could, I pushed it open. And as gently and quietly as I could, I unfolded the ladder down and creeped down into the upstairs corridor. And then again, as gently and quietly as I could, I folded the ladder up and closed the attic door. And then I walked across the upstairs corridor to and to the bedroom door. Our bedroom door was open. And I stood there for a second and I watched as me, the version of me from 2 days before, lay in bed and my wife was asleep and I was laying there. And while I stood there in the doorway, my dog kind of looked at me but didn't move. I stood there and I realized that, okay, I was having a night terror then. I thought I saw somebody in the doorway, and I'm trying to put this all, like, organize this all in my thoughts, that, like, realizing that I was my own night terror. And I took a deep breath and thought, okay, I'm just going to do what I have to do. And that was to get into the car and drive to Tom's farm. So I walked down the stairs, trying not to make any sound, to the front door where the keys were on a hook. And I took the car keys, quietly went out the front door and got into the car. None of it felt real. Like, I thought this must be, either I've lost my mind or I'm dreaming, but it was too real. It was too real for it to be a dream. So I got in the car, started the engine, and I drove off. And I headed to Tom's farm. It's about a 15-minute drive away into the forest. My uncle's pig farm. And while I was driving there, I took the phone out of my pocket and I called my dad and I asked him what am I supposed to do? What am I going to the farm for? And he said, I've got to go there and wait until the timeline catches up. I've got to wait until the timeline catches up to the moment when I was in the attic and traveled back to this point. Because right now there's two of me in the world. And I've got to wait until the moment when there's only one of me in the world. And then I can go home.